Welcome to Piano Inspires podcast, celebrating pianists, teachers, and innovators as they share their inspiring stories about the transformative power of music.
So my name is Nick Phillips, and I'm a professor of piano at the University of Wisconsin-Eau Claire, and I'm here to interview Robert Weirich. Dr. Robert Weirich maintains an active performing career in musical centers throughout the United States. He has performed in Alice Tully Hall, the Kennedy Center, Chicago's Orchestra Hall, and at summer festivals such as Tanglewood, Ravinia, and Marlborough. The New York Times called his 2008 Albany Records release piano music of Aaron Copland, quote, brilliant, probing, and austerely beautiful, end quote. He was the artistic director of the Skaneateles Festival in upstate New York from 1990 to 1999. During that time, attendance tripled, and support grew twofold while winning 3 Adventurous Programming Awards from Chamber Music America and ASCAP. His columns for Clavier Magazine and its successor, Clavier Companion, have been twice honored with a Distinguished Achievement Award from the Educational Press Association. And as a sometimes composer, his works have been performed at festivals nationwide. Dr. Weirich, though recently retired, held the Jack Strandberg, Missouri Endowed Chair in Piano at the UMKC Conservatory and is justifiably proud of his students, who regularly win national competitions, Awadaj Prat in the 1992 Naumburg and Stanislav Udinich in the 2001 Van Cliburn. They hold university positions throughout the country and challenge him on a daily basis in the studio. He received the first Muriel McBrien Kaufman Artistry and Scholarship Award in 2003 and an Excellence in Teaching Award from the UMKC Faculty Senate in 2006. Bob Weirich, thanks for joining us. Having just read your wonderful new book, Recollections, many of my questions for this interview are drawn from themes that I noticed or stories you told that I wanted to dive a little deeper into. I hope that works for you.
Good.
First off, you have a lot of wonderful stories about your early exposure to music. Can you share with listeners a little bit about these first experiences with the piano and your first teachers that had an impact?
I will. I want to first talk a bit more about the book, perhaps, just to give the listeners an idea of what it is. I used to write for Clavier Magazine, as you wrote and mentioned, and I've had those columns in a file for a long, long time. And I kept thinking, I really need to publish this as a book. They didn't go together by themselves, though. Martha Hilly mentioning me in an introduction to a streamed MTNA meeting back in, 2 years ago now, 2021, when Awadaj Prat was the convention artist. And she had to introduce me in order to introduce him. So she mentioned the columns and how she always read them first thing when the magazine came. And I thought to myself at that point, gee, I really had to do this book. Here's COVID. I don't have anything else to do. Right. I better get busy. So that's where the book came from. As far as those early experiences, I wrote about that in the book. First chapter talks about how when I was 7 years old, a cousin showed me how to play Silent Night, the first 4 notes anyway, on the black keys. Dee-da-dee-dum. Mm-hmm. And I thought, wow, there are tunes in that old piano. And so on my own, I figured out the rest of the piece, finding the white keys as necessary, and figured out a few other tunes. And my parents decided, well, he must have talent, so let's give him piano lessons. That teacher is written about in the book. Mrs. Getz is her name. And she only recently died at 102. The other teachers I mention in the book as well, I think that's a chapter that means a lot to me, just because they embody so much of my early experiences.
Yeah, that's great. Yeah. And I'll plug the book also. It's really, really wonderful.
Wow.
And it's going to be out soon.
Thank you.
Certainly by the time this podcast drops.
Oh, okay.
You tell a story in your book about a band director, which it was fun for me to learn that trombone, right?
Right. Oh, gosh.
And I had a similar experience in my own little small hometown. You mentioned that the real contribution of a teacher is to light a fire. And I couldn't agree more. I'm sure you realize that you've lit more than a few fires in your many years of teaching. It must be gratifying to look back and see the impact that you've made on your students.
Well, thank you for that. am aware, certainly, of very close relationships with lots of students over the years that continue, and I could think of no better dedication of the book than to my students who have taught me so many lessons.
That's great. I know that your path in music and your career in academia took several turns along the way. Can you talk a little bit about the process of making hard decisions, because they can ultimately lead to other really enriching opportunities?
Well, yes. The problem with making hard decisions is you don't know what the result will be. You don't know what the future will be. And so when you make a decision, you simply have to live with whatever comes next. My very first teaching job, well, actually, before I had my first teaching job, I was a student at Yale, around New York City a lot, had some connections there. And I really debated whether to stay there in the New York area and try to make it as a soloist. But instead, I took the Tulane job, and the rest is history, as it were. I ended up really loving teaching. Even at Tulane, 2 years later, I had an offer to teach at Northwestern, and it was really hard to make that decision. Even though it was a prestigious jump in the job, I really loved New Orleans, and I still miss it.
Yeah.
So you just never know what you're going to come up with. I think it is proof of that saying. What is it? If you dealt lemons, make lemonade. So you just have to make lemonade all the time, whatever it is.
In the book, you talk a lot about how learning is something that begins at a certain point but never really ends, and it's an important point for us all to remember, don't you think?
Yeah, for sure. I think the thing about learning, you do want to learn new things, but I think it's also important to learn more deeply the things you already know. There's a chapter in the book about the spiral curriculum, which is a term coined by Jerome Bruner, an educational psychologist. And the idea is that in learning anything, you learn very basic things first, and then as the learning continues, it's like you're on a spiral up, and you keep coming back to those things that you learned at the lower level, and then you go a little higher and higher and higher. And so you are, in fact, learning those basics more deeply every time. And I just think that's a good thing to keep in mind.
Yeah, it's really important for us to continue to be open to new experiences while also enriching
Right.
previously learned things. One thing struck me, you at one point you ask why we often manage to take the play out of piano. Do you think pianists take ourselves too seriously? I mean, all work and no play makes Jack a dull boy, right?
Well, I guess so. I hope I'm not dull. The thing is, this field is so competitive, and we have to take ourselves seriously if we're going to make it in this world. I think, though, that we have, in many ways, forgotten how to play, not to play the piano, but to play in the sense of having a good time. And I think I define fun or play as requiring two or more human beings.
Yeah, that's right.
And practice is such an individual, solitary thing, and we can get therefore too serious for ourselves, and it helps to involve other people in what we're doing. Even when we play recitals, that can be intimidating, because here you are in front of all these people and you think they're judging you. But if you can somehow let that go and realize you're supposed to be having fun, you're not going to the guillotine,
Right.
You're supposed to be having fun, the audience wants to have fun, and so therefore have fun.
I recently played a recital that was sort of perfect because the audience was set up in chairs in the lawn, and the piano was right by the wall with windows that opened. So you almost felt like you were practicing at home for yourself.
Oh.
You're sort of aware there was an audience there, but
Yeah.
made things a lot more free for me to have fun.
Fun, sure, great.
I really liked your analogy that preparing a solo recital is like taking on another full-time job. You also talk about how memorization is an entirely unnecessary evil. I share this sentiment, and I'm curious what prompted that realization for you back in 2001 when you wrote that article, and how you reconciled it with the expectations that are imposed on our students by our field and listeners more broadly.
The problem I had when I wrote those articles was that I was simply trying to juggle too many balls, and that when you just now referred to the recital as another full-time job, you already have a full-time job, at least one, and you have many other part-time jobs, part-time administrator, part-time committee member. You're torn by all those things. So there's an emotional turmoil going on, even as you're trying to do something that requires steady concentration, memorization. Why memorization developed as a custom, we blame it on Liszt.
And Clara.
And Clara, right. The thing, though, that keeps coming to my mind is that when you play, you want to know the music really deeply, going back to your learning question. And memorization does cause a more deep learning. So even though I wrote that column, it was in two parts. And the first part was, I may not be doing this coming recital by memory because I just don't know it yet. Second column said, by golly, I learned it. And I played it, and it actually went pretty well. I still think that playing from memory is ideal if, in fact, you have learned it deeply. If you're just doing it because you have to, then don't. And go ahead and use that iPad, which is such a nice way of doing it these days. I just heard in Kansas City a recital by Richard Good that was late Beethoven, all of it. Music he knows really well, although he played he learned, his COVID project was to learn the Diabelli variations.
Oh.
And he played that in this recital. He used music in everything. He had a human page turner, not the foot on the iPad. And I don't think I could have enjoyed that recital more had he played it by memory. From a listener's standpoint, just hearing the music and him playing it, it was fabulous. There was nothing to complain about. And so I gave up on the idea that you have to reach somebody deeply only by memory. That's not the case.
I've always thought that if the only thing an audience takes away from a performance is that I played with music, then I did something wrong.
True. Very good point.
Speaking of recitals, you draw attention to an inconvenient truth of our own, which is that we often play recitals for ourselves, meaning on university and college campuses across this country, halls are usually sprinkled with a small number of students, hopefully our own, but don't bet on it, right? A few faculty and maybe some community members who love classical music and who are often retired. I'm curious if you have thoughts about what we can do to change this and to be more engaging with and to our respective communities.
Well, another tough one. I think that word community is an important one. And it is not just the people who show up at the recital, but it can become a friendship, a kind of connection to them and they to you that is more than just, oh, I'm going for entertainment to hear a recital. And so how can the recital be presented in a way that can happen? With the Scaniatlas Festival, I ended up doing a kind of program design in the first 3 years that we called the season the year of, and in the first case it was the year of the composer. Then the next year was the year of the performer, and then the final year was the year of the listener. And it really takes all three of those for music to happen. Without the listener, you don't have music in a way. I mean, you as a musician, you can commune with it one-to-one, but it's that third it's that third leg of the stool
Right.
that keeps the thing balanced. So how do you do that? Well, you give them special, you acknowledge them in that way. You don't treat them as not knowing who Beethoven was. You don't have to tell them that he was deaf. It's a thing that simply enlivens for the musicians. They end up thinking of you as their friend. You end up knowing their names in many cases. That's, all arts are local. I mean, maybe Yu Wang doesn't have to think about that because she's flying all over the world, but we do. We're in the trenches, as it were, and we don't want the listeners to be taking pot shots at us. We want to be their friends.
Yeah, that's great. It's kind of an ongoing question, and that we all search for answers to.
For sure.
In a column from 1986, you wrote about the need to expand our repertoire selections for teaching and performing beyond the standard canonic favorites. And then again in 1992, you wrote about the changing the standard curriculum. I'm sure that we're sitting here at NCKP 2023. I'm sure you've browsed the repertoire being presented in both sessions and performances at the conference this summer, as well as panel discussions, and you see a sincere commitment to those goals among our community. But to circle back to the last question, if we're being honest, I think sometimes we can also be conferences for ourselves in a way that it's a little like preaching to the choir. We all know these things are important. I'm curious if you see meaningful changes in these areas, and if so, how? And if not, what more do you think we can be doing?
Again, a good question. I think that there are so many little boxes in the world that there's the NCKP box, there's a slightly different box for MTNA, and we tend to think we have to succeed from within those boxes. Again, though, it's the listener, it's the people outside the box that you really want to reach. I don't have any complaints at all about the repertoire being done here this session because it is odd stuff. It's things people don't know, and we within the fold need to know them. We need to educate ourselves. But I think a real challenge for any service organization is to reach outside, to make the borders more liquid. Reaching outside in this case would mean somehow tapping into potential audiences in Chicago or the western suburbs of Chicago, which is where this conference is taking place. When I was president of CMS, one of the things I was really gunning for with the board was to change the idea of the annual program so that it wasn't just esoteric papers being read to other PhDs, but that it somehow tapped into an audience in those cities where the conferences were held. So it took a while to get that started, but it did work. And I think that kind of thing happens much more often now than it used to. That made the people offering themselves in the program have to think about how could this connect to some other cohort in the cities where you are. Now, NCKP always comes to this area. CMS moved around, always does. I think you just came back from an international meeting.
Yeah, and they do a really great job, CMS does, at the international conferences of really becoming a part of the country and the culture that
Right. I think that could be the answer to the question.
Great, thank you. You write that, quote, to make music is one of the highest human accomplishments. We exercise our physical abilities, intellectual powers, emotional responses, and at music's highest levels, our spirituality, end quote. I think that's really just so beautifully said. And since you make music primarily at the piano, it's a perfect transition to my final question. one that's being asked in all of these podcast interviews. How does piano inspire you?
Uh-huh. Well, you kind of answered it already, really, with the idea that if you're playing the piano in a really connected and deep way, you are tapping into all those areas, the physical, the mental, the spiritual, and that's a challenge for a human being. I mean, when you think of the things that a human being can do, there are many, of course, but there aren't that many that check all the boxes. So piano is challenging, and that inspires me. There's a lot of talk these days about AI, and I'm sure AI will learn or be taught how to make music, but it won't feel anything other than what it feels when it figures a million places to pi. Whereas we feel things, and we cause other people to feel things, and that inspires me.
Yeah. Great. Well, thanks so much for taking the time to chat with me today. It's been a pleasure.
Thank you. My pleasure.
Thanks.
The Francis Clark Center is a not-for-profit educational organization that serves the advancement of piano teaching, learning, and performing. Divisions include Piano Magazine, Piano Inspires Kids, Journal for Piano Research, National Conference on Keyboard Pedagogy, the New School for Music Study, Piano Education Press, International Online Teacher Education, and Piano Inspires Online Community Hub. Please visit us at pianoinspires.com to learn more about our impactful work and inspiring community.